Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review. We are continuing on with the artisanal streak on my channel, and we are going to talk about a Maxim Perfume fragrance, who is the son of Dmitry Bortnikoff. I've reviewed a ton of Bortnikoff fragrances. I've done a lot of work on the brand of Bortnikoff, and I also have a live stream on the first 3 fragrances from the house of Maxim if you would like to check those out. But today we're going to talk about his newest release, which I think came out maybe 3 or 4 months ago. It's taken me a while to get around to actually doing the review because I've got a million other things on my plate. But today we're finally getting to Oud Indochine, and look at that picture. Great representation of what you're going to smell in this. That's kind of how his cards come. They have the note listing on the back, which I'll read you once we get into the review, and this is how they come in this little packaging like this with this leather outer part here, and there's the bottle, and look at the color of that juice. Beautiful, deep, dark, rich. This bottle does have a little bit of a problem here, so this is actually a magnetic cap, and whenever the magnetic cap goes on, you can see here, I'll show you. So the magnetic cap is on, you hold it, and whoop, doesn't hold it. So we'll talk a little bit about that here and what I think happened once we get into it. But first, a very quick review. Sorry, not a review. We're going to do a review. Let's try to find some right words, Ramsey. We're going to do an unboxing first. Actually, a triple unboxing. I have been a little remiss in checking my P.O. box, and some very generous subscribers sent me a couple things. This one's actually from my friend John, and let me see what he sent. He sent a couple things, so let me see what we have here. Oh yeah, this is the sample set he sent me with, I think it's supposed to be maybe a blind sniff. I can't remember how he set this up. I'm gonna have to get with him, but let me see how he did this real quick. We haven't done a blind sniffing episode in a while, but give me a second. Give me a sec. Let's see. Vintage Palomo Picasso. Okay, so they are named, so that's good. I'll have to dive into this. There's a bunch of samples here, a bunch of them. Roger Gallet L'Homme. I've never smelled that one. I've wanted to smell that in basically forever since I got into vintage fragrances. Molinard de Molinard, which you guys will know, I think is one of the gems from the house of Molinard. They used to be such a great house back in the day. I've never smelled that, and I have never smelled Jean Couturier Korea, I believe you pronounce that. Keora. So I'll definitely be excited to try these out. So thank you, my friend. I very much appreciate that. Let me just set these up real quick here so they don't potentially leak as I knock everything else over. Great start to the video, Ram. Okay, so next, I think I'm going to wait to unbox all of these as it's a lot of samples. So there's Vintage Jaguar for Men. There's a Jean Patou. There's a Boucheron. Bunch of stuff I'll be excited about talking about on the channel. A Caron. A Bogart. So good stuff. This will be good to dive into. And then there's this one last bigger one he sent me here, which is the Vintage Formula of Havana. So that is, I actually reviewed Havana on the channel. Oh yeah, you can tell it's Havana. I mean, that is one good thing about Aramis, is they keep their fragrances in good condition. But I'll be excited to wear this and see. Maybe one of these days we can do a comparison video. So thank you, John. Very, very, very kind of you guys. And I'll repeat to anyone who has ever sent me anything. As you can see, there are a ton of stuff that I want to get to. It's just time, you know? It's kind of one of those things where there's just not enough time in the day. So if you ever sent me something and I haven't talked about it yet, please be patient. I want to get around to talking about everything, of course. I wish I could do this full time, but unfortunately, the little bit of money YouTube pays me every month for this doesn't cover pretty much anything in my monthly bill setup. So yeah, it's kind of more a hobby than anything else for me. So, okay, so that was the first one. The second one is some samples, and I know what this is because this is from Allie. Actually, the next 2 packages are from Allie, so thank you, Allie. Allie's my Amouage sugar mama who always sends me the best Amouage stuff. And so here we have I know what we have. We have the new samples from Amouage, which I know a bunch of folks have wanted me to try. There's actually some folks who have gone in and left a comment on a couple of my videos about how terrible the new Amouages are. So I'll be excited to see if I agree with that sentiment or not. But so here we have the Amouage Lustre, I guess you pronounce that. The Amouage Outlands, and then finally the Reasons. Horrible names. I'm not a fan of the names, but yes, the new Amouages, which everyone has been wanting me to try, so I can't wait to try those. I have a bad feeling about whether I'm going to like them or not, but at least I have them to try now. And there you go. The Perfumer's Batch, Esteemed Client. Man, I really don't like the path that Amouage is on, but anyways, that is, you guys have heard me say that for a long time now, so that's nothing new. And finally, we have a box, and this is also from Allie, and I know what this is, and these are all gifts. I did not pay for these, so the generosity is real. She sent me a photograph and said, hey, I'm going to be getting rid of some stuff, but you have first dibs. Just tell me what you want and I'll send it to you. And I said, okay, I won't say no to that. Merry Christmas, Ram. So very, very, very kind of her. She definitely did not need to do this. She did that out of the kindness and goodness of her heart. So this is a sample of Roberto Greco Rock. I forgot how you pronounce that. If it's rock or I don't remember. But I was really excited to try this because this is a Christopher Sheldrake creation, so that should be awesome. And then let me show you the two bottles that she sent me. One is discontinued. One is still available to purchase, from my understanding. Okay, so the first one is from the Opus collection, and this is Opus 3. And I actually just did a ranked Amouage review, if you would like to check, or a ranked Amouage library collection list, if you want to see my, I believe it was 15. We did all 15, and I ranked them, but this is a full bottle of Opus 3, which was done by one of my favorite female perfumers, Caron Vinchon Spenner, and unfortunately, this is one of the Amouages that got the axe. Oh, I think it's just so classy. I think it's one of the most French-inspired Amouages. You know, it reminds me of an Amouage take on like a vintage Guerlain or something like that. But yeah, go watch my review on Opus 3 if you want to get my full thoughts on it. But very happy to have this. This is kind of one of those gems to have, and I'm sad that they discontinued it. Mimosa, Broom, Carnation, Nutmeg, Thyme, Violet, Jasmine, Ylang Ylang, Orange Blossom, Ambrette, Musk, Papyrus, Cedarwood, Sandalwood, Gaiac Benzoin, Vanilla, and Frankincense. So thank you. Thank you, Allie. Very, very, very generous of you. As I know you probably could have sold that for a very pretty penny. So thank you. So that is Opus 3. And then she sent me one more, which has basically knocked out one of my most sought after women Amouages, and really, as far as the women side of things go, that really only leaves Overture Woman that I really, really want a bottle of. And so this is Memoir. This is Amouage Memoir Woman, which I think is one of the best women's Amouages that they ever made. So there you have it, Amouage Memoir. And yeah, I did a review on the channel of the women's version, but off of a sample, off of a decant, and I was just bowled over by the complexity of this. Like, if you're looking for a complex animalic, well, animalic but also wearable, if you're looking for a fragrance with depth, Memoir Woman is definitely one to check out. I was extremely impressed with Memoir Woman. This is the Eau de Parfum, I believe. Yeah, this is the Eau de Parfum. And so from my understanding, this is still in production. It was done by Dorothy Pio and Danielle Morial. It's absinthe, cardamom, pink pepper, mandarin orange, frankincense, clove, black pepper, dark woods, precious woods, jasmine, rose, white blossoms, fenugreek, styrax, labdanum, leather, musk, oak moss, and castoreum. So yes, I cannot wait to wear this. Perfect for this time of year too. Finally got cold day after Thanksgiving here in Texas. So hope you all had a great Thanksgiving wherever you are. So that is Memoir Woman. So I am just bowled over by the generosity of some of the folks subscribed to me. So thank you for your kindness and generosity. And I will try to get some of these reviews done as soon as I can, especially the new Amouages, as a lot of folks have kind of been clamoring for them. Okay. So let's go back to the house of Maxim. So first of all, you guys know that I talk about the good and I talk about the bad when we talk about fragrances. So the first line that Maxim put out were 30 ml bottles. And so here's an example of Muscaturier, which again, I've got a live stream where we talked about some of these if you want to check that out. But the cap is exactly the same as kind of what it looks like to me. And I think what ended up happening is in the 30 ml bottles, the cap holds just fine. Once it's in place, it holds, you know? But the first collection was only available in 30 ml bottles. Once they did this was kind of like a one-off. It wasn't an entire collection. Oud Indochine was like a one-off, and they decided to make 50 ml bottles. So 50 mils, they actually have two variations of this. They have the 50 ml bottle like this that you can buy for $400, or they have this sort of like a 100 ml, it's almost like a limited edition that they've done, okay? So it's 100 mils at $750, and there's only 25 bottles made for the whole world. So it's a hand-blown 100 ml glass bottle. So this is the 50 ml version, but I don't think that they changed the cap. So I think what they did is they kept the same cap and magnet. See how it just came off right there? Like it's on and then it comes off. And that's not good for someone who, if you pick this up and it's in the back of your collection or something, the bottle drops and breaks, and they need to fix that on the next one. So I know that's kind of a small issue, but small issues also need to be discussed, okay? So if you've been following my channel for a long time, you know that there was a little while there, maybe like a year or two in 2020, end of 22, 2023, when Dmitry Bortnikoff was pretty sick, the father of Maxim Bortnikoff. And from my understanding, he was in the hospital. He wasn't doing well. He's recovered since then, thank God. But a lot of these Bortnikoff fragrances, which was one of my favorite artisanal houses for the longest time, started to be penned by Maxim Bortnikoff. The perfumes that were coming off were actually not by Dmitry for a little while there. And some of the ones that he did, I reviewed some of them on the channel. I was very, very harsh on them. I was not kind. Because I didn't think the fragrances deserved to be kind. I thought they were not very well made. I thought they were bland. I thought they were flat, you know. And I was like, what is going on, you know? And I was praying at the time, absolutely praying that Dmitry Bortnikoff would come back. So when Maxim Bortnikoff released his own brand, I treated it with a little bit of skepticism, you know, because my experience with him whenever he was the perfumer, the quote-unquote perfumer of some of the fragrances for his father's brand, Bortnikoff, were not impressive. I didn't like them at all. And so when he came out with his own line, I was very skeptical. And these first three releases and now this one has completely changed my tune. I think that he has either learned from some of his sort of early struggles, which very well may happen. I mean, this is kind of like anything else. You have to learn a lot of time by trial and error and experience, especially. And so I think he decided that he either wanted to take his house in a little different direction from the briefs he was given at his whole old man's brand, or that he learned a lot while he was sort of doing some of those perfumes. So to me, these fragrances, these first four fragrances, including Oud Indochine, which I think is a name kind of maybe blending East and West a little bit together, you know? You get some of the Western influence, and you also get some of the Eastern influence of China and kind of merging in India and stuff like that, okay? So I think that they smell a lot like sort of the early Bortnikoff fragrances. Okay, so if you like things like, for example, Oud Maximus, which I have a full review on the channel. If you like Oud Monarch, if you like Lao Oud, if you like those type of Bortnikoff releases, this is definitely one to check out. So I'm going to do a fresh spray here, even though I don't need to, but just so I can show you guys the sprayer and everything, and the color of the juice. And so if you can imagine those early sort of Bortnikoff releases, like take something like Mysterious Oud. Mysterious Oud is probably the closest comparison for something like this because of the way the oriental touches are done here. But imagine using some of that chassis, if you will, but removing the florals that his father, Dmitry Bortnikoff, was so good at using, you know? A lot of times I've noticed that the floral touches here are completely different, but some of the heavier, heftier touches, right, are very, very similar to what you got in the very early Bortnikoffs, which I absolutely love. I love that about these fragrances. Just imagine the elegance of some of the florals kind of being removed, if you will. So if you want the Cliff Notes version, Oud Indochine is sort of like a chocolate oud, all right? But imagine something like Oud Monarch, or Russian Oud's probably even a better comparison than Oud Monarch, because Oud Monarch relies so heavy on those florals, whereas Russian Oud really doesn't as much. And if you can imagine kind of the heavy hand of Russian Adam, how he made Russian Oud, and sticking with the big ostentatious parts, the big blast of oud and chocolate and heavier notes like labdanum and resins right from the start, that's what Oud Indochine is all about. This fragrance is all about sort of heft and power, and it's just one of those smells that feels like it has weight to it, you know? It feels like it will literally weigh you down. It's a heavy, heavy fragrance. Oh, I love it though. The top notes, and it's interesting because in the top you almost get a little bit of this oud coffee thing, even though there's no coffee listed. But it's interesting because you get small hints of cardamom and vanilla right from the start, but it's almost overwhelmed by these ambery facets right when you first spray like this. Labdanum, deep, rich, dark, melted chocolate start to come through. And then as the minutes tick by, 15 minutes becomes 30 minutes and stuff like that. I've got a 3-hour dry down here. Some of those top notes almost seem to circle back, like they come back around, and all of a sudden 15 to 30 minutes in, with all of the heavier, melted chocolates and labdanum and stuff like that, you start to catch whiffs, almost like the top notes got a second wind. You start to get a little bit of that chemical saffron, sandy type feel. You start to get a little bit of that cooling cardamom start to circle back around. Maybe there's even a little bit of star anise mixed in there. It has that anisic-like feel, that Coca-Cola can sometimes give, mixed in with this chocolatey, ambery resin just being kind of burned. Imagine like burning resin. So here, before we kind of go any further, let me read you the blurb. So here is the olfactory description according to MaksimPerfume.com. So it's just like it's written here on the bottle. Maxim, M-A-K-S-I-M, perfume. Just not plural, just MaksimPerfume.com is his website. So the fragrance opens with a captivating blend of cardamom and red saffron. It's interesting because I think those come through like 15 to 30 minutes in instead of mostly on the first blast, but they say it opens up that way, giving the composition a spicy yet elegant warmth. The gentle sweetness of vanilla softens these vibrant notes, creating a smooth and inviting introduction. At the heart, sacred warmth from frankincense sakura intertwines with the rich resinous notes of labdanum and the earthy sweetness of myrrh. A light honeyed nuance from beeswax. There is a little bit of beeswax in here, but I think it just blends with that honeyed resinous type feel we'll talk about in a little bit. While Gaiac wood introduces a smoky, woody character, enhancing the complexity and depth of the fragrance. The base is a luxurious blend dominated by the rare and refined combination of Kinam Oud, South Thai Oud, and Hindi Oud. These ouds form a deep, woody foundation full of mystery and sophistication. Rich gourmand notes of chocolate and cacao add a sensual warmth, while a hint of tar brings a dark, smoky touch. The long-lasting trail is rounded off by the smooth and oceanic notes of ambergris, giving the fragrance a sense of depth and elegance. So, very interesting write-up, interesting note listing, and even take a look at that picture again. That's a really good indication of kind of how it smells. So in the top, you have cardamom, red saffron, and vanilla. The middle notes are frankincense, sakura, labdanum, myrrh, beeswax, and Gaiac wood. The base is Oud Kinam, Oud South Thai, cacao, tar, ambergris, chocolate, and Oud Hindi. So hell of a note breakdown if you're kind of a artisanal lover, if you will. So just off of my initial sort of impression, and I've worn this maybe, I think 3 or 4 times as my scent of the day. You can see I put a pretty good dent in the bottle. And I would say this fragrance, whenever I give some of the houses a hard time for not having enough oud or enough labdanum or being heavier, that kind of thing, Maxim took that to heart And you can kind of really see the growth as a perfumer when you wear a fragrance like this compared to some of the stuff that he made for the Bortnikoff brand. However, I would say he could probably learn a thing or two about sort of the way Dimitri, his father, incorporated some of those florals into the blend, because I don't know whether it was, because he used such high quality florals or just the way that he blended them together, but the vividness of his father's use of florals gave this very interesting kind of balancing technique. It's like a counterbalance to the heavier notes, which again here they really feel extremely heavy and rich and dense, which I love fragrances that do that. But I feel like maybe just a slight bit of contrast would be like the absolute cherry on top. And I feel like young Maxim could definitely learn a thing or two about that from his old man. And it's interesting because, if you take someone like Maxim, who is obviously the son of Dmitry Bortnikoff, and then you take someone like Anton, who runs a fragrance brand called Aton, which I've reviewed multiple Aton fragrances on the channel. His newer one was awesome and the best work he's ever done. Full bottle worthy, 100%. They are both really doing their thing. It feels like they're kind of leaping ahead, leaps and bounds, in growth. And I really feel like the future is bright for both of these kids. So, but I feel like in this particular fragrance, focusing on Oud Indochine, Maxim sort of nailed that majesty, the power of the heavier notes that folks tend to expect when you buy a artisanal fragrance like this. And I assume this is the sort of heft that people imagine, oud and ambers and thick resins and frankincense and myrrh and all that stuff will smell. And Oud Indochine turns that base, it turns that, feeling of heft, of strength, of power up to, an 11. He absolutely nailed that part of it. If he can work on the contrast like his father did, using like, the magnolia and the frangipani and all that stuff, he'll be an unstoppable, artisanal brand. My 2 cents on it. But I think that would really benefit him in sort of taking the next step. And what better teacher than his old man, who's obviously right there with him. Most likely he can take notes from him and all that stuff. So I think the sky is the limit for both him and Aton, learning from their friends. And of course, Russian Adam and Dmitry Bortnikoff are partners in that Feel Oud, as well, and they release 3 fragrances from the brand. They do the oud oils and all of that stuff, so they're kind of friends and competitors at the same time. It's interesting to see the younger generation sort of take the next reign. So what ends up happening is in Oud Indochine, after a few minutes of letting the fragrance kind of settle, you notice that the frankincense has this freshly burned feeling. So have you ever seen like a piece of frankincense actually being burned and how it slowly starts to turn into this, like it like melts almost into this like gummy gelatinous resin as it's burning and sort of releasing that smoky incense into the air? That's the image of Oud Indochine for me. That sort of resins sort of burning. And if you can just imagine that sort of gelatinous, sticky aspect being the base of the fragrance. So that's where all of these like tar pit like notes merge together. And if you love French style perfumery, imagine this sort of oriental style fragrance, okay, with lots of labdanums and myrrh and vanilla, but executed in the Middle Eastern style is kind of the best way that I can describe it. So the myrrh sort of adds a slightly earthy, balsamic element to the fragrance. And of course the oud and the chocolate. I mean, the color of Oud Indochine is literally the color of like melting chocolate in my head. It's like bubbling in this dark witch's pot, right? And you get this bubbling chocolatey tar. And if you think of the image of sort of labdanum being applied to like battle wounds from hundreds of years ago, imagine how thick that labdanum would have been to almost work like a super glue. If you got cut by a sword or something back in the day, they would take labdanum and almost use it like super glue. They would put it in the wound because it helped keep it clean, it helped keep bacteria out, and it also helped the healing process. But if you've ever actually seen labdanum resinoid, it's like, I mean, it can almost work like a Chinese, finger trap. Like your fingers are in and you can't get them undone. It's so thick and heavy. And imagine that smell and that texture, that thickness, but with that warmth, If you've ever smelled extremely heavy labdanum style fragrances like the Zoo's Everlasting, I reviewed that on the channel. or Tom Ford's Sahara Noir. I reviewed that on the channel. Or, you know, Roja has a Chypre that's a very heavy labdanum note in there, and it's his Haute Luxe, they call it, but it's just known as Roja from 2013. It's his most expensive fragrance. And we'll do some more Roja reviews because there's some interesting news coming out of that house, by the way. But that sort of warmth and thickness and heft, right? And amberiness, that will get you in the ballpark of how warm and spicy and thick Oud Indochine feels. It's like a bubbling, brewing, resinous tar pit, you know? And it has this accord that I've come to think of as like a burnt amber, you know? Imagine like an amber accord, like in Ambre Sultan. I was going to say Ambre Supreme. Ambre Sultan. Imagine this amber, this classical amber accord, but imagine it being like burnt. Like they've literally taken it and they've burned it. And so it has this feeling of the backbone of the fragrance being this oriental style amber with the labdanum and all that stuff, the stickiness, but burnt. And I think the frankincense adds a little bit of that. I think Gaiac wood, of course, adds a little bit of that barbecue, burnt wood feeling. And of course the oud. There's multiple types of oud in here. And so this brand so far to start, in my opinion, has been releasing fragrances that wear almost like you can imagine like a sprayable attar. Like imagine you take an attar and you turn it into a sprayable format and you can spray it on your skin. Sort of like how Russian Adam's earliest works were with Russian Oud and Oud Zen and stuff like that, where they have this lava-like feeling to the backbone. I would put Oud Indochine in that category, in that Russian Oud territory. But the Oud used here is a bit more aggressive than Russian Oud. Russian Oud was a little bit easier to digest. It was supposed to be more of a gourmand oud. It also had real musk in there, which I don't think this uses real musk. But there is this strange crossover of coffee. Remember when I first spray, I said, man, it almost smells like you're walking into a coffee shop and you can smell the different types of coffee drinks that people have ordered. And that seems to emerge from time to time. And I don't know if it's just the cacao that gives that off or what. But if you can imagine, you know, a woman walks into a coffee shop, orders a, you know, frappuccino or whatever, a dark coffee, and then her daughter orders a hot chocolate. And you can just imagine those two smells kind of coming together. So imagine blending like Russian Oud and Oud Luwak, which I desperately want a bottle of Oud Luwak one day, into one, but done in the style of the previous sort of Maxim fragrances, okay? And again, I have a live stream on the channel if you want to go learn about Muscatorier or some of the others. So now, if you've ever heard me sort of discuss musk in general, sometimes the grains can have this like chocolatey, powdery aspect, and actually the inside of the musk pod can look like chocolate on the inside when they cut it open. You see the musk grains in there. What's interesting about the actual cacao pod, which I think there's a lot of cacao in Oud Indochine, it's literally a chocolate take on oud, is it's nothing, it doesn't look anything like you would expect. You would expect you cut it open and it kind of looks like this, right? It doesn't, okay? It doesn't look like that at all. Once you cut open a cacao pod, you're almost greeted by this white cocoon-like structure. And you almost have to peel it back and scoop it out and all this crazy stuff. There's whole, you know, videos on how properly to do that. But inside of your mind, if you can just imagine sort of scooping out the inside of that cacao pod like you would a pumpkin on Halloween or something, you just hollow it out. And then what you do is you fill it up. And what you're refilling it with is this chocolatey looking, what looks like the inside of those musk pods, but imagine this truffle-like chocolate smell, okay? And that's kind of how the fragrance progresses as the hours tick by. Sometimes when you smell this, you get a little hit of that coffee I mentioned in the beginning. Sometimes when you smell it, you get this almost like chocolate ganache-like feeling, but imagine being it like it's coated in some sort of cacao powder, like the powder was sprinkled on top of the truffles. If you've ever had a proper French style truffle that way, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that sort of coating of like cacao powder. It's very important in the understanding of Oud Indochine, I think. And sometimes when you smell it, it almost feels like you're getting this sort of warm, slightly sweet, but also like roasted, earthy, balsamic, like melted, bubbling chocolate, you know, like a hot chocolate, like you melted it into a drink or something. And the fragrance goes back and forth, you know, between these two extremes for the next couple hours. But even if you can imagine this sort of chocolate vanilla, the most important thing is that it's unsweet. That's one of the most important things about Oud Indochine to me. In the chocolate in your mind, you shouldn't be thinking like this Hershey's milk chocolate. You should be thinking like a dark chocolate, okay? Like a proper unsweetened dark chocolate. And that is the fact that I think most impressed me about Oud Indochine, is that he was able to create a fragrance that, you know, is a gourmand technically, because it has so many chocolatey gourmand aspects, but he was able to do it unsweet. Very, very impressive stuff. And along with everything that I've talked about, you have this charcoal like burning high quality Sacra frankincense from Oman that just adds to this, you know, it adds an interesting counterbalance to the mass and heft of the fragrance, because I mentioned that's kind of the majority of what you're going to smell. Heavy ingredients that feel like they actually have weight to them, like you put them in your hands and they hold weight, you know. And then you combine that with something that feels ethereal, light enough to just like float away, right? And that's the frankincense side of it, almost like the ashes to ashes, dust to dust thing. You know, we're here, but we could potentially be turned to ash and be light enough to blow away in the wind. That's that imagery your mind can kind of wander and go back and forth between that thick, almost boozy, like balsamic, resinous, you know, side of the fragrance, which is probably what most people will focus on at first. But then the more you wear it, the more you're going to realize that there's something about this ethereal, floating frankincense going up into the air, you know, light as a feather, just floating up into the atmosphere. And when you think about the atmosphere, that's where I think the ambergris and the base can really come in, because the ambergris sort of adds that atmospheric smoke rising, you know, reaching the highest areas of our atmosphere. So, and again, that's originally where the term perfume came from. It's to smoke. And so you imagine in the old days lighting frankincense for your prayers being brought up to the Almighty, whichever God you pray to or believe in or don't believe in. That was kind of the idea back then. So let's talk about the oud, because when people buy a $400 for 50 ml artisanal fragrance, they are going to want some proper oud if it's an oud fragrance like this, and that's exactly what you get here. So there's basically 3 types of oud used here. There's Oud Kinam, which, to be frank, I think if he used proper Kinamic oud in this, he wasted it, because everything is so dense and heavy that it's hard for me to imagine someone being able to like appreciate the more cloudy, airy, minty aspects of Kinamic oud, okay? Maybe it's supposed to add a little bit of a counterbalance or whatever you want to call it, but I don't see it. You know, I don't see this. I just don't see the Kinamic aspect playing much of a role here. It's too much going on. You need it to be more like you need it to be more focused on the Kinam aspect. Something like this, the history of Kinam oud, much better shows that, you know, minty, cloudy, airy, light side of things that you just you know, if he used some very expensive Kinam oud in Oud Indochine, it's hidden under everything. So, and then you have oud from South Thailand, which basically adds this fruity, slightly sweet, slightly smoky notes with touches of like tobacco and stuff like that. Thai oud is generally much more likable. It's easy to approach. And compared to some of the other ouds, it's probably a good starter oud, if you will. And then there's that fermented barnyard animalic oud used here called Hindi oud, which is usually refers to Indian oud, much more traditionally animalic, much more traditionally fermented oud. You get touches of that barnyard aspect here, but it isn't some animalic beast that might put some people off. I think of like a more gentler iteration of Indian oud. Think of like a softer version of Indian oud. I would describe it as giving enough funk to keep a hardcore frag head like me interested, but still being well balanced enough where all of the more likable aspects are going to maybe allow someone who's a newer comer into the artisanal space to appreciate it, if that makes sense, okay? So I really like how heavy on the nose the fragrance is. I'm continually impressed by this house. I think Maxim has sort of put my fears to rest with him being at the head of a house like this. And I would say the artisanal space is officially now getting crowded. I mean, it's getting to the point where I can't keep up. Every single video I've been doing lately has been on the artisanal houses, and every single video that these houses are different. You know, I talked about Sherwood, I talked about Arige, I talked about Jinx, I talked about Maxim. You know, Bortnikoff has these new fragrances I haven't even smelled yet. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. So for someone like me who loves to go everywhere, it's very hard to keep up with all of the new releases. And this is just talking on the artisanal side where there's not as many reviews done. Forget the designer side where it's just swamped with people talking about the new Dior's and all this stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, there's so much more stuff I want to share with you guys. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of finding that time. It's hard to keep up, but I think we're just going to focus. We're just going to do like an artisanal week and knock some of these out that have kind of been waiting in the wings before we move on to other things. So probably some more Jinx reviews coming up. Definitely want to talk about the new Amouages as soon as I can. Maybe I'll give like a early first impression thing. You know, but this is the side of the world that has been interesting me the most. This artisanal space has kind of been what's kept the fragrance game so new still and invigorating for me, because otherwise it would all be vintage. It would all be just wearing Bellamy and Antaeus and Opium and all that stuff. You know, it's back behind there. But yeah, I mean, it's I can see how someone who is just trying the new YSL fragrances or the new Dior Sauvage Forte or whatever may just get sick, and they may just be just disgusted by what's going on in the fragrance game because it's so boring. There are other more exciting things, but you almost have to like hunt them out. So anyways, that's my take. If you have any experience with Oud Indochine or just the House of Maxim in general, let me know. Let me know in the comments. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as always. I appreciate all the feedback and love you guys give me. You know, it's been an amazing journey. So happy to have crossed 11,000 subscribers and much, much more content to come. As always, cheers. I love you guys. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. See you next time. Bye-bye.